Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Raise the Vibe with Liz. I'm your host, Liz Peterson, and today we're going to be talking about Taoist Sexual Alchemy with Jade Lotus. Super excited to have Jade join me today. Jade, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for inviting me. I'm so happy and honored to be here.
It's so great to have you. Why don't you start by sharing a little bit about who you are, what your personal journey has been to where you are right now, sort of your origin story to what got you to right here, right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what am I doing right now? Well, after studying, initially I started off and I did a degree in law. So I was all kind of planning to be a lawyer. And then that all just fell to pieces because I just realized my heart and soul wasn't into it. So I finished the degree, but then I went on to study Chinese medicine. And when I was studying Chinese medicine, I was really lucky that coincidentally, I ended up on quite an obscure Chinese medicine acupuncture course, which was really based in Daoist theory, because actually most of them are not based in this ancient Daoist theory. And through this, I discovered the practice of Tai Chi, Qigong, and then I discovered about Mantak, Chia as well. So I'd really gotten into acupuncture because when I was, I think, about to begin the final year of my law degree, and I'd had all kinds of health problems. And one of them was I had eczema all over my body, and it was waking me up every night, scratching. It was really like quite a problem, and I didn't like using the conventional medicine. And then someone suggested to me, well, why don't you try acupuncture? And I was like, yeah, right. Don't be ridiculous. Sticking needles in someone like that's going to ever, make anything better. And the thing was, I thought it was so ludicrous. I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go and try it because it's so ridiculous. Yeah. And so I went to see this guy. He didn't even speak English. He put needles in me. After the third session, it was, chronic long-term eczema, which people live with for their entire lives, gone, right? So that was a little bit of a surprise, and I think it slightly started opening up what had been an extremely, let's say, an extremely closed mind towards anything to do with energy, because I grew up with quite hardcore religious Christian parents, and I really just rejected the whole thing because I found it very kind of abusive, I suppose is the right term. And then in that summer, I ended up going to India. I didn't have an idea what to expect in India. And I got there and I was suddenly like seeing sort of like goddesses, I never knew there was a goddess. I thought religion was like he Jesus, he God, he the Holy Spirit, and so on, and suddenly being like, wow, okay, I'm also, as a female, included in spirituality. And that was just after I'd had my acupuncture treatment. I mean, who knows, maybe it sort of unblocked something going on energetically or who knows what, but I just started to kind of see onto life in a different level. And I suppose, I discovered about Tantra, I discovered about yoga and so on, about this kind of spirituality. I came back to England, but I was still like very much me finishing my law degree, in my kind of, conventional way of life, and then somehow in the next year, I figured out that, funny as it sounds, I mean, I was only young, I think I must have been 19, 20 at the time. I suddenly realized women were supposed to have orgasms, and I'd never had an orgasm. I thought just men had orgasms, right? So I, and first I was kind of, it was my boyfriend. He actually asked me, he says, why do you never have orgasms? And I'm like, oh, right. Okay. I didn't, and well, I mean, sex education is so terrible. They just try to indoctrinate you with fear of AIDS and, so I guess it started kind of going on in my mind first, just a little bit. Yeah. But then I remember one occasion he started getting quite upset about me not having orgasms, thinking that it was somehow him or whatever, and me just being like completely confused, but then just getting this growing sense of like my body just being in this place of chaos, and basically starting to kind of understand that, I was having all these various problems, which I'd been trying to ignore through like smoking cannabis specifically, and not just not having orgasms, a lot of back pain, anxiety, insomnia. Just those are the things I'm thinking. Obviously, cannabis addiction is, it's an underlying emotional issue that's going on that you're not able to deal with, that you're just kind of like numbing out, And then it was actually, well, I tried to ask my doctor, I tried to find conventional wisdom on the matter, and essentially found myself just almost feeling really stupid for asking about it and feeling like something was wrong with me, and definitely like not being heard, like the doctor, as if, I was kind of just going about something, asking her to pierce my belly button or something really superfluous, almost worse, And it was still, it was just bugging me more and more and more. And then I ended up going to India for a second time. And I ended up in one of these bookshops where you have just all these kind of a lot of secondhand books, all very kind of, chaotic, a completely chaotic pile of books. And I remember going in, and it's like this moment that, okay, the book I still have, it's a yellow book. So obviously a yellow book is bright, but it was like this book just shone this whole light onto me and just pulled me right in, and I just looked on the book and it said, Cultivating Female Sexual Energy by Mantak, Chia. And I pulled the book off of the shelf and I looked at it and I was like, this is what I need. And I just knew it on this instinctive level. It was the first thing I saw ever in my life that I was like, I know this is going to give me the answer. So I started reading the book. Well, it gives all these exercises, and it also says, don't practice the exercises without a teacher, which fortunately I didn't try to do. And I got back to England, I got back to London, and I started finding Universal Healing Tao teachers. And I started going to workshops, getting my head around the Daoist stuff, going to other, Qigong, Tai Chi with different kinds of Daoist teachers, wanting to find out all about what is this energy stuff all about, And I would say in that year, in the beginning of that year, I had been struggling on and off with this cannabis addiction. It was really, really bugging me. I mean, the orgasm thing was bugging me too, but I was more and more becoming aware that I was really like messing up my life, and it was, okay, I was having one joint in the evening because I could not sleep without it, but I couldn't sleep without it. And I travel around between different places, and I'd always make sure there was a piece of cannabis waiting in this other place. For me, when I came back, and okay, it was, I had money, I wasn't having to steal, but, or beg or borrow or whatever, but I just knew it was stopping me from my potential, And I think essentially I remember going to get I'd smoked a joint, I went to get some money out of the cash machine, and I've actually left £300, which is about $400 in this cash machine, and just walked off. And I was like, life cannot go on like this anymore. And I'd already had that book. And then I think I got on the first workshop. I started learning the exercises. It was in the beginning of that year, and I was having like back pain every day, every afternoon. I was having to lie down for half an hour, because I didn't want to take painkillers. And there was just so much stuff going on, such a big mess, really, like mood swings and so on, which obviously cannabis smokers, they want to just go, oh, it just makes me so chilled. But the reality is, mood swings, really, And so I started doing these exercises, and I just was incredibly drawn to it. I got incredibly into it. I was doing it for hours a day, absolutely loving it, learning how to get in a relationship with my organs, smile to my organs, use sounds to get negative energy out of my emotion, learning how to circulate my microcosmic orbit, learning how to do Tai Chi, Qigong, these different postures and so on, which I was doing it, but I didn't understand what it was about at first. But I was trying, at least with the Qigong and Tai Chi, which can be a bit tough, to really get it. And then I saw this woman was doing a workshop for women, teaching the women's sexual practices, which was what was in the book I'd found, how to use this jade egg thing and put it in your vagina and everything, So I was like, okay, I need to go and get on that course, So I've gone to this course. It's a 3-day retreat, staying somewhere else, And I would say, like, I was already feeling energy in my body. And it was interesting because I suppose, anyone that has been a cannabis smoker, you probably know the feeling, the high, and you get a bit addicted to that high, and then that kind of becomes your default position where you're comfortable in. And when you're not in that position, you're not feeling so great, for some reason, and I was finding I was doing these exercises, not even the sexual exercises like the microcosmic orbit and so on, and I was finding that it was replicating the cannabis high, but in a way that it wasn't giving you the paranoia and the negative. It was just giving me this really nice high feeling. So I'd certainly been building up some amount of energy, and then she's teaching for a few days these different ways how to massage your breasts, massage your ovaries and so on, going over a lot of the exercises I knew already, but and then finally on the last day, she gets us all lying together in a room under blankets, with our own privacy, with our eggs, taking us through this meditation. So we're holding the egg to the different organs, smiling to the liver, feeling the green energy, filling the egg and so on, And then she brought, she says, bring the egg to the yoni. They use the word yoni, bring the egg to the yoni, So the egg goes there. And then she said this thing, which completely blew my mind. She said, ask your yoni, what does your yoni want? Does your yoni want the egg to go inside? And I was like, oh my God, I always thought it was a hole that was for him to shove his thing in, right? The idea, like it never crossed my mind, in the past that I could even be having sex with my partner and tell him, oh, I don't want that or whatever, it was just this whole new way of looking at my body where suddenly my vagina, my pussy had grown this personality, and I was actually giving it honor, So I remember spending these sort of about 10 minutes feeling really pleased with myself, going, no, you can't go in, and finally, and the incredible experience with the Tao practice that I learned, which is extremely gentle, and you're very gently using the muscles to slowly bring the egg in through these reflexology points, using these healing sounds, tuning into the healing sounds and using the sounds and actually noticing the different energies in the different parts of the vagina, and then going off with the most important part of the exercise, not actually being the egg, but being to scan through the vagina and use these sounds to remove these negative energies, or these energies that don't belong there, whatever we want to call them, So I went home, and I think I was doing for about a week, and I was finding just huge amounts of energies, like, that didn't belong to me, just leaving my body, even sometimes during the day when I was in a park and so on. But I remember like having this one moment, probably a week after this workshop, where I was meditating, using the sound, and I just started feeling these huge clouds of energy coming, dark energy, I suppose, coming out of my vagina. And suddenly I just started getting this kind of buzzy, tingling feeling, which I'd never felt before. And I was like, whoa, okay, is that what my vagina is supposed to feel like? It didn't even, because I'd been so shut down, which many, many people are, I hadn't felt anything, but I wasn't even aware how much sensation I could have. I wasn't even aware that it was numb, And then I guess just suddenly I started having these waves of energy just moving all over my body, and just this huge change and shift in my body, because I suppose the energy just had unblocked, And I mean, this it was just incredible. My whole life really, really started changing with this. Suddenly the back pains were gone. The insomnia was balancing out, the anxiety and everything. It was like suddenly I had this new improved version of myself that must have felt like 10 years younger or something, and I continued going to more workshops and doing enough study to then become an instructor, which has then taken me eventually to Mantak Chia's place in Thailand. And it was like I was introduced to this whole new world where suddenly, instead of it just being me as a physical being living in the physical world, there's this whole world of energy. And when you become aware of that energy, and sometimes people say, what is energy? Well, it's when we feel like, wow, I'm amazing. It's emotions we feel, our energies. We say sexual energy. Hello, it's energy, there's energy in so many forms. So when you become aware of this layer around you, that you're not just living in the mundane world, it's like suddenly you're experiencing life to its fullest. It's literally like the colors are like more bright. You become you can start seeing where you're going and what you need to do. And it's not that all problems disappear overnight, or you're suddenly whatever someone wants to say enlightenment is, or that you're suddenly perfect. Certainly you still have your problems, but you have tools to deal with those problems when the negative emotions come up. And I suppose, having then that supply of the sexual energy, and I've always been a very motivated person, which was probably why the cannabis was bothering me, because I knew that it was inhibiting my, my progress with what I was doing, but so much more energy to do things with, and yeah, it was really, really amazing to meet Mantak Chia. I mean, he's such an incredible guy. He's so pure-hearted. He's absolutely not egotistical. He's got this incredible energy, and it's really like the energy of just pure-hearted love, And he'll explain, he explains stuff, and it's very, very advanced stuff. And you could easily see that someone knowing all that stuff could get very egotistical, but there's not the egoism or anything about that. Also, I love the way he explains like sexual stuff, sexual techniques, but there's nothing seedy about it. There's nothing uncomfortable about it. It's just so pure hearted, and you can listen to him for hours, and he would just come off the stage and just talk to you. And you just feel like two children just talking together really innocently, in a way that there's no feeling he's better than you or anything. So it was just a real incredible feeling. And it was actually, I was following as many of his lectures as I could go to in person, unfortunately, until the lockdown hit us.
Right.
Which, well, I can't wait to get back out to Thailand or something, to see him again, or whatever's going to happen. But, it was a huge shift in my life. And I came back then with an instructor permission, to start teaching people, which was pretty cool, teaching people Qigong, Tai Chi, different kinds of practices. And also, well, around this same time, I also ended up doing tantric massage course, getting into giving tantric massage to people, which was something I'd just thought I was going to do to a couple of women every month or something, and just ended up blowing up into a massive thing where I'd intended never to do with men, but having so many male clients and just finding really absolutely mind-blowing. And I guess that that these, what I learned with Taoism, I was putting it into the tantric massage, and I was giving people techniques from Taoism as well as doing the massage, so combining these two things. And well, one thing that was very interesting was, these techniques that you learn in the tantric massage training, they're incredible, and so I would have sessions with couples where I would teach them to give the techniques to each other. And one thing I realized was, to me, I'm just doing this and this, and oh, it's so easy, but I was teaching people to do these things, and people were really struggling with them. And then I had to kind of think, hang on a minute, you've done like a lot of personal work to balance your own energy, to get yourself in the right place to do that. And one thing that was really coming up is most people feel sexual energy, see genitals, and panic. And in fact, the whole model of sex that's essentially marketed to us is the model of adrenalized sex. So we get in an adrenalized state, and we go into this kind of Netflix style 1 minute wonder or whatever, and then it's all over, and I guess the big focus, what became with my bodywork sessions, and what I realized was working with my particular clientele in London, was it was so important to get them to experience a non-adrenalized sexual arousal situation where they're experiencing a really relaxed sexual feeling, where they're breathing deep belly breathing, into their belly, and how life-changing just that, in its own was. And I mean, at some point, and I suppose partly to do with you know, knowing about it being quite tough to, you know, it taking a little bit more time than I originally thought it would to teach people how to give each other the tantric massages, you know. I then realized, okay, I need to make an online course about this, you know, so the course teaching, kind of taking what I learned doing tantric massage, but obviously abbreviating it down. And I aimed the course towards men, teaching men how to give to their lady, you know, and starting off where they spend a week getting into the relationship with themselves. So it's just a 6-week course, but it's a fair amount of study material, I suppose you can say. So the first week getting into a relationship with their emotions, their energy, their breathing. Another week flirting and seducing, you know. So how important it is to really create the connection, first of all, within yourself, then with the other person, because so many people, they're kind of bored by sex, they're, you know, numbed, you know, people are watching like, you know, multiple porn videos, jerking off with like 6 different pornos all on the screen, and God knows needing all these different partners, and, you know,
and it's not
massive sex toys and everything, you know. Whereas I suppose what this is about is it's very minimalist, and it's coming back into the place where less is more, and then even less is even more, because you're connecting with energy rather than just trying to force the arousal onto the physical body, you know?
Yes.
So then the 3rd week of the course was spending the course, was learning about touch, transmitting touch with lovely energy. And then I made the last 3 weeks that it was all talking about the pussy massage or tantric massage, yoni massage technique. So they spent a week learning about the outside, and I'm always a little bit of an iconoclast, but in tantric massage, we don't actually massage the clitoris. So, and I think because people are so used to clitorises, it's so good for them to learn stimulation without the clitoris, because otherwise they just kind of go there and get lazy. So they're watching, you know, it's 5 lessons because it's quite structured, it's quite academic. So there's a quiz at the end of each you know, each lesson, for example, you know, so learning 5 techniques to stimulate the outside of the pussy. I did a whole week about penetration because it's just such an incredible moment to go from the outside to the inside that most people just do so sloppily. They're not activating the sucking reflex, they're banging inside. And then of course you have this huge epidemic of anorgasmia, incontinence, all kinds of gynecological problems, which mostly comes down basically, you know, to bad sex. And then finally the last week teaching them all about the internal female pleasure spots, you know. So I did that, and it was cool, and loads of women were asking me about what was their course, you know. And also with this kind of thing, I'm kind of aware that, you know, what a woman can easily get, a guy is not necessarily going to easily get with this kind of practice unless he's very committed to it, you know. So that original course, anybody could have gotten on the course and done it, you know. I mean, the other course now, which is the multi-orgasmic toolkit, anybody can get on it too, but it's got the self-development part is spread out over the best part of 2 months. So really learning the Daoist techniques to activate your energy, to really create that harmonious relationships with your emotions and your organs, really like you know, turning your body into this vessel, which can then be used to transmute your sexual energy. So the multi-orgasmic, of course, because, you know, first we're moving the microcosmic, then we're learning how to bring our hormones into the system, then the unaroused jing, the aroused jing, and the orgasmic energy, and just really just step by step by step, opening everything up, you know. And then, of course, you know, because when we start learning, you know, this is a problem I had, so many women have had, you know, you learn all these new techniques, you've practically got this new body, and suddenly you're having sex with people that are living out there in this porno world, you know, where they think it's all about a big cock banging hard while you're bending over doing doggy style and so on, you know. And so I've added, you know, the techniques so that the men still get the sexual techniques, but they've just had loads more time to kind of get prepared for it. And then, you know, with us ladies, it's slightly different challenges that we face than men, because, you know, obviously, say what you want, men are men, women are women, you know, and getting feedback from female clients, my own experience, feedback from male clients and so on, you know, and you know, 99% of men we're going to get in bed with are going to be bigger than us. You know, if their sexual energy is running, you know, that they're running off of frustration, they're going to just kind of take us over and do what they want, you know, which is what we're used to doing. But suddenly that's not the thing that you want anymore, you know. And I mean, I'd figured out in my relationship some techniques from tantric massage where, well, I had a partner that actually he was like coming really, really quickly, you know, the first few times we had sex. And obviously, you know, to say premature ejaculation to the guy, it could be like a really distressing thing, you know. And I think just in general with people, you've got to be very, very careful bringing up things and saying things to upset them, especially when you've been doing a lot of self-work, you know. But I quickly figured out how to like relax him, open up his meridians, and get him completely experiencing sex, where he was just, instead of getting all adrenalized and pumped up and tense and coming, he was then relaxing, you know. And it's very important for us women to give foreplay. I mean, my personal opinion is most of the crime in society could be prevented were women to properly be giving foreplay to men, because what we do as the yin, as the female, is we ground down the yang, which is rising up too much and getting too excessive. And at the moment, we have a problem in the world that the yang is too ungrounded. And we as women, we need to step strongly into our power and essentially ground that yang down in order to balance out the world. So, I mean, well, yes, so this course is finished. People are doing it. They're giving me amazing feedback, which I'm so pleased about. Well, you know, and my next step on the journey. So I'm based in the UK. I believe you're in the US, right?
Yes.
And in the UK, thank goodness, people are a little bit more sexually open, you know, and in schools already they're teaching about pleasure, you know, and they're aware, but obviously they're teaching the use of vibrator kind of pleasure, not this stuff, right?
Right.
You know, but my next plan is to actually try to get my content onto the sex education syllabuses in educational establishments, probably having to start with over 16s initially. Mm-hmm. But once I find it's being accepted and used and people are finding benefits from it, you know, I mean, because I have a daughter who's about to turn 11, you know, and being aware, having spoken to so many people with porn addiction, being aware about what's going on now in the world, about young children, young boys getting onto porn very young, and you know, you can't expect them not to be adversely affected, especially when they're seeing abusive scenes, which is extremely common, you know. And it really just concerns me for the future, because when I think about the time I was kind of coming into my teens and getting sexually active, there was the whole thing that, you know, if you go down the road with your mini skirt and a few beers and you get raped, it was your fault. Yeah. Now that just changed as I was in my late teens. That changed, and the law was like, right, you're not allowed to just go around raping women anymore, guys. You know, and I've seen it getting that they're, you know, that they're trying with public message to really, you know, reiterate to people about, you know, consent and date rape and so on. But just what I see as the big problem is, you know, when you have people watching pornography, which is very well put together, you know, they know exactly how to drag people in, they know exactly how to get into people's minds and get them addicted, you know. And when someone is watching that again and again and again, and then you have like a website that, you know, I was looking literally at one of them today because I was writing a blog about this. You have a website that looks like a kind of job center website, but it's talking about sex, you know. And then I actually put in the search bar pleasure, and the first thing it comes up with was an article about consent. And you've got to think, like, the average 14-year-old boy is going to see that and he's probably going to like run out the door, you know. And the whole visually, it's not going to be appealing to them, you know. And so I just see this huge need to bring sex education and awareness that, look, if stuff isn't going well in your relationship, look, I'm not telling you what to do, but people should know there's an option, that it doesn't mean you need to become polyamorous, doesn't mean you need to watch porn or get a sex toy. There is other options that you can try, you know. And even when things are sexually going wrong with people, you know, that, you know, I mean, I tried when I had my sexual problems, I tried a few times vibrators and it just absolutely did nothing, you know, whatsoever. And sure, it's not to say some people don't get benefits from vibrators, but to kind of, when everyone's telling you, oh, the vibrator should do it, and then you're just like, it's not doing, do you know what I mean? Anything that, for people to really know that there are options out there. And I just think in general, it's so important that there's intelligent conversation around sex, that people feel like they can talk about that, because it's a bit like, you know, I go surfing, and when you first want to go surfing, you do surf lessons, you look at YouTube videos, you talk to other surfers. I mean, can you imagine if I just grabbed a surfboard and was like, no, who needs to have lessons, or like ask other people or watch YouTube videos, let me just run in the water. And this is how we're approaching sex, and it's all just going like horrifically wrong. And I do just, you know, like I've talked to people, and I do talk to people who've been in jail for date rape, you know, and people will say things like they don't understand what happened, you know, and people, especially when there's drugs and alcohol and so on involved, it's just, you know, that it's bad enough without it. But, you know, and then you have people completely not in touch with their sexual energy. The whole idea that someone thinks, well, I'm really enjoying it, the other person must be enjoying it too, it must be great for them, you know. And so, I mean, my dream and my vision is to essentially, I believe that within one generation, the whole date rape thing can basically be obliterated. It can be stopped. It's not something that needs to be going on, but we need to start educating people and children, especially, you know, because I've spoke to a guy who raped a child when he was 8 years old. He raped another child when he was 8 years old. You know, this is stuff that, you know, parents need to be aware. Your child is 10 years old. There's a fairly good chance that that child is getting on and watching porn. They're probably getting bullied by other kids in school if they're not watching it, you know. And what are your kids watching there? As much as we want to put our head in the sand and we don't want to realize that our kid has got this budding sexuality, they want to know stuff. And if we as parents cannot be the go-to place of authority where the child knows they're getting their information, what they want to know, everything, they're going to go off and they're going to look on Google, and we know what they're going to find. And it's going to show them stuff that essentially, if they do to another woman, is abuse, possibly illegal. And it's not telling them this is not okay, this is abusive, you know. So I'm very into pleasure, and I think that when we understand pleasure, the whole thing of, you know, non-consensual stuff just goes out the window, because pleasure doesn't work without consent.
Mm-hmm. And your journey seems to be a lot about, you know, getting in touch with your own physical body, learning techniques to run your own energy, to have authority over your body and be self-empowered. So bringing these things into conversations, not only with adults in your practice and in your workshops and that sort of thing, but I do like your idea of having a broader perspective when talking to our children, you know, having children myself, you know, and having those open conversations about getting to know their own body and, you know, learning those social cues and learning what pleasure is, I think is important.
Absolutely, you know, and kids ask questions and we can get really uncomfortable. I mean, when my daughter was like 8, she's like, Mummy, how do two men have sex together? You know, and well, because of who I am, I was a little, okay. And then I just explained, right? She had a little giggle, you know, and I mean, she's grown up, we've always had dogs, she's seen animals having sex, she's always known what sex is, she's always known what periods are, you know, but I think, you know, if you don't answer that question, look, if they're not asking you, you don't need to sit down with your 8-year-old and explain how men have sex. But if they ask you, they're ready to know. And then just you giving them that information in a way that just, I suppose, is just respectful, you know, it's going to stop them from just sitting there going over and over and over. Because I remember, I mean, my mum, I asked her about how do babies happen, and I must have been 14 or so, and she told me the stork drops them down the chimney, you know. And I remember sitting, and it just turned into an obsession because she wouldn't tell me, you know. And
that's just being uncomfortable having a conversation, right?
Yeah,
so you just tell a story and hope they get over it and move on, right? You know, which is healthy.
Yeah. And the sad fact is that, you know, so many parents are just uncomfortable with their own sexuality. They don't know what they're even doing with their partner, you know. So it is really important that us, you know, as parents as well, that we really start being honest to ourselves, and it shouldn't just be down there or getting dirty or a secret little thing we're doing in the room, but it really needs to be something that essentially we collectively and individually are taking out of the shadow. We're bringing it into the light, and we're bringing it into our consciousness, because it's only when we're conscious about sexuality that we're then going to be you know, playing it out in the way that is designed for us as humans, which I believe is like a massively powerful healing force, you know, because when we don't know what's going on, you know, even like so many, for example, like people who've, like I mentioned, you know, been accused of rape or committed a rape, and they may genuinely believe what they did was okay because they're just acting according to what's been given to them as social cues about what's okay to do on the one level. But another level, because people both, they're not aware about emotions, they're not aware about sexual energy. And what happens is when there's a lot of repressed emotions, especially in men, it will kind of attach onto the sexual energy and turn into this huge driving force needing to come out of the man's body as an ejaculation. And it will take so much control over him that it's almost like he goes into this blackout, because also as he's doing that and having his sexual arousal, a lot of his traumas are actually coming out, and the only way for him to release it is to just go into this ejaculation, you know. And I've heard many women, and I've had this experience myself, that you could be having a guy, you know, making love with a guy, and it can be a good experience, and suddenly he goes into this race to have his ejaculation happen, and it just suddenly turns like the whole energy just changes, and it turns into this kind of not pleasant experience, you know. So
Right.
so yeah,
Let's wheel back to where you were learning the different exercises in the beginning, where the Qigong and the Tai Chi were teaching you how to be in touch with your body and run your energy.
yeah. So I mean, essentially the idea is, you know, we think of our bodies as, you know, most people don't prioritize their body. And I'm talking, this includes people doing loads of gym, loads of working out. They still don't understand what their body is about. Because you might think, okay, I want to get an aesthetic look in my body. That's all well and good. But really what you want is, you want a nice, supple body where energy is moving. And having big muscles does not equate to necessarily being very physically fit, or even
no detachment.
Wrong, yeah, because what happens is the huge muscles can really block up the chi flow as well. And it's possible to, with chi, you know, be incredibly strong without, you know, really needing, you know, all that musculature, essentially, you know. So if you think the body, obviously we have the physical structure, and the physical structure is very important. So for example, with Qigong, an important part of Qigong is we learn to straighten out the spine. We learn to stand in positions that at first can be really awkward, you know, and we're straightening out the spine, you know. So sometimes you've got to stand in these positions for perhaps, you know, half an hour, for example. And when you're learning it as well, sometimes this huge guy would come and start like pushing you, but when you're just relaxed into this position and the chi is flowing, he actually can't push you. I mean, it's quite amazing, really, you know. And so you're learning, you know, to get in this relationship with your structure, and to really realign your structure and open your whole body so that the chi is flowing, you know. You're also learning so one of the main tools is to just, it's called the inner smile. So it's just shutting your eyes, looking inside, for example, looking into your heart, smiling and sending love to your heart. And you can do this any body part, you know, any organ, but you go in this journey that they kind of call, you know, Mantak Chia, he says, fall in love with yourself, organ by organ. So he's promoting, we smile to grow the love in the heart, but then we go around all the organs and we're giving love to all the organs. We're getting them, the energy in each organ balanced, and the organs working together. And the whole understanding is that essentially emotions, they're actually not in the brain at all. They're actually energetic vibrations in our bodies. So essentially, we can start using this smile, visualization, sound, and other techniques like eye movements to start to either transform negative, so we don't dump the energy or vent the energy or repress the energy. We actually transform it, because the whole idea is that within every negative emotion, there's like a positive as well. So we find that, for example, anger, which is the most demonized emotion, certainly for women, that we can take anger and it's like a stream that we can ride and use for creativity, you know. And when we start understanding our emotions, not being like, oh my God, that's a bad emotion, I got to repress it quickly. We actually going, okay, and sitting with the emotion and talking to it and finding out what is its message. A lot of stuff in life really starts changing.
I agree. Yeah, and a lot of time in society, you know, they're don't feel this way, don't express yourself, don't speak when not spoken to, that sort of thing, or you're not allowed to have your anger. I think our anger is there for a safety mechanism, right?
Yeah, and there, it only turns into rage because it's being repressed,
right?
You know? And ultimately, you know, one of the important roles of anger is healthy boundaries. And I believe this is the reason so many women do not have healthy boundaries. Because if you look at men, the only emotion men are allowed to experience is anger, you know. If you look at women, the only one we're not allowed to experience is anger, you know. So you go with these women just repressing, and then you kind of turn into these little sort of balls that are just kind of getting kicked around, and you're too scared to kind of, you know, someone's walking all over you and you're too scared to actually say something. And unfortunately, society does tend to raise men without them being conscious, with a sense of entitlement, especially entitlement to our space, our bodies, and so on, you know. I mean, I really found, like, as a woman, you know, and this is especially with what I do with doing business and so on, you know, that this is a real thing that, you know, it's not conscious, very unlikely to be conscious, that the guy is sitting there thinking, oh, you're a woman, I'm going to give you more of a hard time or whatever. But it's just a subconscious thing, and women do it to other women as well. But when you start using these Taoist practices, you know, I mean, interestingly enough, they developed at a time thousands of years ago in ancient China, where women were virtually being kept as sex slaves. And for example, you would have like a lord or a king or whatever, and you would have hundreds or even thousands of wives, concubines, sex slaves, prostitutes, and so on, all living with him. You know, if you displeased him sexually, he could just cut your throat and kill you. Your life was worth that much, you know. And if one of the lords invaded the land of another lord, it's likely they would slaughter all the women, hundreds of women easily, you know. And so women were really living in these ways where their life was, you know, they certainly were not equal to men, you know, and their life was quite, I don't know, yeah, you know, it was disempowered, and it was very tenuous. You know, you could be alive one night and you didn't please him sexually one night, and the next minute your throat is cut, you know. So women started using these exercises to actually learn to use our power, you know. And as women, you know, if you look at a man, obviously a man is physically stronger than a woman, you know. Most men are, you know, they have a lot more body build because of the testosterone and so on, the way they're just made, they're just stronger, right? Well, women, we have our strength too, and that strength is our energy, you know. So when it comes to Taoist exercises, women can do these exercises and get results much faster on the whole than men, you know. And we as women are energetically very strong, and when we come into our energy, it's kind of almost like, you know, I mean, nowadays, you know, you have the whole kind of stereotype of the toxic female. Maybe one of them would be just the one that's kind of, you know, just completely docile. You have another one of the angry feminist and so on, you know. But there is this place that, you know, even for someone who's been through abuse at the hands of men, that you can actually come to a healing place without needing to be a victim, without either needing to be expending and wasting a lot of energy through I mean, it takes a lot of energy to be hateful, right? Or angry and so on, but there's a way to just come into our power and be strong in our power. And so it's an incredible thing for women to do. And I think as well, one of the things I liked is that it's not this whole idea that you get with some of these kind of pseudo spiritual teachings where they're telling you, oh, be feminine because feminine means this and feminine means that. And it's like, well, how different is that from my mom telling me what I should be like because I was a girl at 10 years old? I don't want someone to define. And women are such a diverse bunch of people. Men are so diverse. I know men who are more feminine than me. And it's not that there's something wrong with, what do we want all men to be some kind of Rambo style alpha male and all women to be some little simpering Cinderella or whatever? Diversity is an incredible thing. And at the same time, with the male practices, it just allows you to come into who you authentically are and to really know who you are. What is your societal programming, And Master Chia, he talks about this thing of go back to your original programming, using the Tao practices to return to our original programming, to literally return ourselves back to the way that they were originally programmed to be, because otherwise we are going to have problems with the cells that end up turning into things like cancer and so on, because it's all interconnected. I mean, it's interesting he says that, and I was just thinking of my mom and dad and their church, right? And they have this certain belief, and the thing is, they're all getting cancer. They're all getting cancer and dying of cancer, and it just really struck me that, wow, there's something going on, that it's like you're not being your authentic self. I mean, interestingly enough, nobody in their church gets Alzheimer's, right? Alzheimer's, where they lose the memory at the end of life, right? Which I believe is because they're against television, so they don't own televisions. And I do wonder if that is, the connection or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's just been the most incredible journey. And I suppose when it becomes part of your life, then you just have this kind of, in a way, when I think about, when in the old days they used to call women witches and they used to burn them, obviously most of that was someone was growing a lavender plant, or they were like a doula or a midwife or something like that, But at the same time, magic is a real thing, because when we learn to tap into the energy field, we are tapping into magic. And these things can be used for the negative as well as the positive, although I've seen people use it for the negative to come to quite bad results, I would say, for themselves. Mm-hmm. And yeah, but I suppose it is something anybody can learn to get in touch with the energy field. So rather than banning knowledge about the energy field and cutting humans off from their potential, it's actually good for people to understand, and understand that ultimately the best way you can build up energy is on the basis of self-love and pure-hearted. And everything you do in a pure-hearted way is going to have the beneficial good results.
Yeah, one of those ways you brought up of getting in touch with that internal energy is the microcosmic orbit. Can you discuss a little bit what that is for our listeners who might not know what that is and what that does for the body?
Okay, so you're probably familiar with the system of acupuncture and the meridian theory, and that we have meridians that travel through our body. They call it 12 meridians, although on each side there's 12. And each one feeds like the liver, the lungs, all the different organs. And you can just imagine that as like a river system. But there's two main meridians before we get to those 12 meridians, called the Dumai and the Renmai. And these meridians feed the 12 meridians. Okay. Now, if we go right back to the beginning, in the perineum is a point called the Huiyin, and coming out of the Huiyin is our source of energy, which is Jing energy, which is kind of like, there's similarities and crossovers with sexual energy. Okay, so what that energy naturally wants to do, and of course, if we're living in harmony with nature and so on, that energy is going to travel up our bodies through a meridian up the center of the body called the Chongmai. It's going to travel up into our heart, not coming up as an oversexed feeling, but coming up and transforming into love, into an energy that spreads through the whole body, heals the body, and an energy that essentially will fuel anything that we want to do. So they literally call it the superfood for the soul, you know, when we can access this energy. Now, the way Master Chia teaches to first get in touch with the energy, and I think he's correct, because there's the meridian up the center of the body, the one up the back, and the one up the front. And the easiest way to start teaching it, and one of the first things he teaches people to do, is to start moving the energy up. And you use your intention. So it's like the whole theory is wherever your attention goes, the energy flows, and you move with your attention from point to point, not being in the brain, but actually being in the body. And as you move your attention, the energy moves, and you start activating these meridians. And it's a real thing. You like really feel it, you know, when it starts happening and when it starts moving. And I mean, I suppose when you initially do it, you'll sit down, you'll spend some time, but then it just becomes second nature. And so you can just sit, like, for example, because I've worked on mine just thousands of times, so I could just sit here, I can visualize, but I might just kind of rock a little bit like this, you know, and tune into the energy and just kind of feel it going around. And it has quite dramatic effects on so many things, including the immune system. But I mean, one thing I love about it is, if you look at so many of these spiritual traditions, whether these are New Age spiritual traditions, Christianity, and so on, there's this whole thing of kind of spiritual bypassing, you know, the Christians saying the flesh is sin, and, you know, so many spiritual people wanting to kind of pretend they don't have emotions, and awkward relationships with the sexuality and so on. And so up here we have the higher self, you know, so it's kind of like the spiritual self who's all like, wow, yeah, I'm so spiritual, I'm so enlightened. And down here we have the lower self, which is like, yeah, I want sex and I want a Lamborghini and I, you know, want all these things, yeah, in the world, right? You know, and up here is sitting there looking down and go, oh, so disgusting, I'm going to just pretend you're not there. But obviously we're in the physical body, in the physical world, with emotions, with sexual energy, with Lamborghinis, you know, for good reason. And essentially, we need to integrate the higher and the lower selves to work at our optimum. So if you're just operating off of the lower self, at some point you might have your Lamborghini, but at some point you're going to crash, you know. And if you're just up here in the higher self, and so many kind of spiritual people will just be like, yeah, I'm so spiritual enlightenment. Oh, can you like lend me 20 quid or something? Do you know what I mean? Like this, because the two are not integrated, you know. And ultimately it integrates the lower and the higher self. And I guess this is one thing I love about Taoism. It's so pragmatic, you know. There's nothing like, look, you don't have to do whatever, you know, looking at it sexually, right? You can practice celibacy if you want, but if you're celibate, you can have sex. Nobody cares. You can have, I mean, one of the main female characters in Taoism, the Queen Mother of the West, she was a legendary, apparently, character who had sex with 5,000 men, you know, so she's kind of maybe the Taoist equivalent of Moses or something like this, you know. Although the majority of Taoists probably will pair bond as couples, the point is nobody's saying to you sex needs to be like this or that, or it's immoral. What they're saying is this is how you get the most energy out of sex, you know? Mm-hmm. So it's very much about you here in the body, and the morality is get your body as strong as it can. And Taoists, they get accused of being selfish, of course, you know, but the whole idea is that, you know, when one is not having adequate self-love, to then try to give love to other people is always going to come across as contrived. It will come across as meddling, you know. When one is full of love in the heart, full of love in the body, the love is filling the whole aura, you know, it's going to just affect the whole interaction with the outside world, because you've literally got this excess love just showering down on other people, you know. And I teach this stuff. Some of my clients are CEOs, and I teach them, you know, you're in charge of the company and you need to, you know, keep everybody together. And even just that person coming from a place of love, it really has a big difference in the productivity as well, because love is just so powerful, you know, but genuine, authentic love, not I'm going to give you some roses or whatever, like real, genuine love. It's an energy that you just can feel.
Yeah, and it's a great product of running your chi, your life force in your body and being grounded and centered in yourself.
I mean,
Right.
love is very
From that
important.
loving space. Yeah.
Yeah. And being grounded is very, very important as well, because if we're not grounded, we're essentially going to just have problems with just getting blown all over all the time, you know?
Mhm.
So
I liked your
yeah.
origin story where you were talking about how you went to this that 3-day course and it ended with the yoni egg practice, and how doing that practice over that week, you know, after really helped you get in touch with your body, get in touch where you were numb, get in touch where you were separate from your body, where you didn't have authority, you know, over your yoni, or, you know, all those places in your past where you weren't taught, you know, that you are this being and this belongs to you. And, you know, I heard a very, you know, separate aspect of almost like a disassociation, which we can have when we don't have the education, or we're raised with guilt and shame and we're not supposed to do this, that, and the other. And or the patriarchal society where, you know, we're just there to please men and it leaves our pleasure out. Right. So I really appreciated you sharing, you know, your personal journey to where you really got in touch with yourself. For our listeners who may be experiencing the same thing, what advice might you have for them if they're finding themselves in that situation where, you know, they don't have that authority, they have that disconnection from their self? You know, what have you learned from your experiences that you can share with women who may be experiencing the same thing?
I mean, well, obviously, I mean, I found the Tao practices was a formula that absolutely sorted me out. And I've seen with so many different sexual problems people have, what it does is it balances out the sexual energy and it gets it flowing, you know, in the way that, you know, that it should. But I think, you know, understanding that perhaps, you know, most of what we're being told about sex, I kind of think is either, you know, kind of rubbish, yeah, or maybe just, you know, not the whole story, you know.
Mhm.
And that it really is about, you know, if you're having problems with not having orgasms, not having sensitivity in your vagina, or men are having problems with coming too quickly, and you know, erectile dysfunction, it's not that, you know, these are things we don't have to live with these things, you know, and that there are solutions. And maybe it's not, you know, a click of a switch or a pill that you swallow or whatever, you know, but there are ways to go through this process of clearing out your energy, because essentially what it is it's blocked energy. And it's not just me not having orgasms or me not feeling pleasure, you know, it's me being fundamentally blocked, my health suffering, my direction not being clear, you know, my creativity suffering, me just not becoming myself, because I don't have access to the most powerful energy that I need in order, you know, to live my life in a, you know, in a way that's where I'm, I guess, operating at my optimum.
I love that. And you have, through all your study, you have a Wednesday challenge coming up. So those listeners who are listening today in the premiere on YouTube, you have something coming up next Wednesday, the Full Body Orgasm Challenge, that's going to lead into a course that you're going to be doing that you mentioned earlier, the multi-orgasmic toolkit. Can you talk a little bit about what that's going to be and what that can offer our listeners?
Absolutely. So the course is actually, it's a 5-day challenge. Yeah. So there's 5 whole days of it. And I'm really excited. Obviously, there's recordings going out to the people who don't manage to see it. But I want to essentially introduce the practices, because I know, you know, people can see me on Instagram talking about multiple orgasms. They might be imagining orgies or big dildos, or, you know, I don't know what they could be thinking, you know, because that's what we are told, you know, this porno idea of multiple orgasms, you know. Whereas, and what I've just repeatedly tried to make clear to people is, you know, this is about our relationship with ourselves. We can't rely on another person to give us our orgasms. Our orgasms are ours. And it's very much to do with our journey of self-development and our journey into our bodies. So I start to teach the practices that I teach in the multi-orgasmic toolkit, because I want people to get introduced to these practices and really to start to feel the benefit of them, to really start to be able to understand how they work. And that although sometimes I can talk about them and they can sound really complex, this is stuff that anybody can take and implement into their lives to really get the changes that they want to get in their lives.
That's awesome. And how can people reach you, Jade?
Well, I have my social medias, which are all called The Art of the Bedchamber. I have my website, theartofthebedchamber.com. So there's email. I suppose people can email me, they can message me on social media. And if they're interested in what I'm doing, then we could arrange a Calendly, a call to have a little Zoom to discuss what's going on with them and see if anything that I'm doing would be beneficial for them.
Awesome. And is there anything that you would like to leave our guests with today, a pearl of wisdom, as we wrap up today's talk?
You know, lots of things. You know, I just think our bodies are the most precious things that we have, and we are so precious. And I think just investing in ourselves, which, you know, there's not so much of a culture of doing that, but really investing in ourselves in the way that we need to be invested in is like so important, you know, and to value what we have as our bodies, and to understand that it's not just going running or lifting weights or whatever, but really that we have this tool that we can get into our energy. And when we start understanding our energy and using it, our whole lives are just, we have like 10 times more than what we had in the first place. So getting into doing this is just, you know, such an incredible thing to do. And I would definitely recommend even just the most simple exercise, take that into your life and start to get in a relationship with your energy.
Awesome. Well said. Thank you, Jade. It's been great having you. It's been a fun discussion, and I really appreciate you coming and discussing the Taoist tradition with us. It's been a great call.
Yeah, my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thanks. And thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm your host, Liz Peterson, and this is Raise the Vibe with Liz. And you can find me on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram at Raise the Vibe with Liz. And my website is liz'shealingtouch.com. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Remember to get out there and raise the vibe. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.